Welcome. So, what we're going to do today is continue the sixth chapter that we've been studying. But before beginning, I would like to start with prayers. And if you're familiar with these prayers, you can say them with me. Otherwise, you can close your eyes and listen. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Wonderful. Is the temperature okay here? Okay, great. So, was anybody here last time or last to last time? And you were here, and do you want to tell us anything if anything comes to your mind from the discussion so far about this chapter? We just started the sixth chapter. We are doing seventh to ninth verse today, and I guess you're also there. Sorry, I don't want to point out, but okay. So any memories coming, so we can start constructing the discussion here. Anything you remember from last time? Yes. So there is some hints. We've talked about two kinds of enjoyments. We've talked about an instant gratification, and we've talked about a delayed gratification. And then we've talked about how those two things affect us and how they are the two kinds of programs that are two kinds of operating systems almost that can run on the mind and get us more and more programmed into being in this world, and how to deal with them. So that's one thing we talked about. Does anybody else remember anything else? Okay, well, thank you for making it on a long weekend. As you can see, there is less people, so feel free to move forward. And this is going to be an intimate discussion. Today we're going to talk about verses 7 through 9, which talk about this idea of equanimity and what is the vision of a yogi. So there is a lot of people who claim to be yogis, and then this is a guidance, a reference for them about how their vision can be or should be, according to Krishna. So we'll look into that. So before, we would like to start with reciting these two verses, 7 and 8. And let's get a little deeper into the Sanskrit and see how we can relate to these words here. So please repeat after me. We'll do one quarter at a time, okay? Jitatmana prashantasya Paramatma samahita Sitoshna sukha dukkheshu Tatha mana pamanayo. So, any familiar words here? Anything clicks to you? Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Do you want to tell us what it is? Can you translate it for us, please? Yeah, thank you. Anything else that you guys remember by reading this, or any words that stick with you? Any familiar words here? How about the word Atma? Okay, and then here it is used as Paramatma, which means the super soul. Atma can refer to the soul, it can refer to the body or the mind. Here it is referring to the soul. And Paramatma refers to the super soul. And so what is this super soul? Any thoughts about that? Is it like a Superman? Like in a big soul? I'm sorry? Yeah, so what about Krishna is the super soul? What is the why is the soul called, in other words, why is the soul called as super soul, and why is this why is the super soul called as super soul, not just like soul type 2? Okay, so that is a faculty of cognizance, that the super soul is aware of all of the different bodies and all of the different minds, whereas we are only aware and have limited control over our body and mind. So that is why it is in a separate categorical existence of the super soul, whereas all of us are souls. So that is Paramatma. Any other familiar words? He already talked about Shita, which is cold, which was just like a month ago, and Ushna, which is heat, which is today. So winter and summer. Anything else that comes to your mind? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that is compared to the cyclical nature. In the verse that he quoted, there is a cyclical nature described between summer and winter, or different seasons in a year. Similarly, there is a cyclical nature of happiness and distress in life, which means that both of them follow each other without really us wanting to. So sometimes we only think that we want happiness and want to move away from distress, or sometimes when we are in distress, we think that this is never going to end, this is going to last forever. And then we take ourselves very seriously, especially when we are in trouble. Nobody takes themselves seriously when they're happy. It's only about fun and how to become more happy and how to be in the moment, etc. But when we are in distress, we tend to take it very seriously, that as if this is the end of life. But Krishna says that it is not the end of life. In fact, it is going to be followed by an episode of happiness. Even if you don't want, it will be followed by that. And then it will be followed by another episode of distress. So therefore, the one solution proposed there is to tolerate that change. That is, of course, as we will see in this discussion, that's a partial solution. We cannot just simply tolerate and at the same time be happy. There has to be something else that has to be added. But part of the solution is to tolerate the changes in the weather, and similarly tolerate the changes in the weather of the mind, which is the distress and the happiness. So that is Sita, Ushna, and Sukha and Dukkha. Anything else? Yeah, what is that? Yeah, so honor and dishonor. So we'll look into that today, about how these things affect us and how common it is for to have these things in our life. So to analyze this, so Jita Atma Prashantasya, which means that this person who has conquered his mind, so here Atma is referring to the mind. So this person has conquered their mind. Jita is to conquer. And Prashantya means that their mind has become very peaceful. Another place in the Gita, there is a verse which says that the mind of this yogi, which we are discussing today, what we are going to discuss today is the vision of the yogi. So what do they see when they see the world? So the mind of this yogi is like an ocean in which there is streams of desires, which could be potential streams of desires which flow into the ocean, but that yogi's mind is not disturbed. So that is why here it is called prashanta, which means completely silent or completely peaceful. And why is so to such a person, Paramatma means super soul, Samahita means that the person has already achieved that realization of the super soul, which is interesting because that is just a neutral platform. So you're seeing that this person is becoming neutral in this world, that they are seeing happiness and distress as the same and honor and dishonor as the same. And as a result of that, they're able to see the super soul. Whereas for many of us, when we are attached to either of happiness and distress, which usually we are attached to happiness. Anybody attached to distress here? There's nobody likes that. So anyway, so when we are attached to that, we will not be able to see the super soul. And we will discuss why. So what happens to this person? Then now it is describing the behavior of this person, that they are sitoshna sukha dukkeshu and mana apamana. So in dishonor and honor, in winter and summer or spring or whatever else seasons you have, depending on where you live. And in happiness and distress, they are equal. They're still steady. Prashanta means steady. So that's this verse. Let's read one more. Okay, let's repeat this one. Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutasto Vijatendriya Yukta iti uchyate yogi Samaloshtrashmakangshana. So what about this? Any inputs here? Anything clicks with you? Anything that is familiar? Yeah, what is that? Yeah, Vigyan is experience. So tell us, so Jnana is knowledge which you can achieve by reading. There is different kinds of knowledge, there is a field called epistemology. Sorry, I cannot say it correctly. But it categorizes different streams of knowledge. So knowledge is acquired by reading something. And so spiritual knowledge is acquired by reading books which are spiritual. But Vigyan is something different. Vigyan is realized knowledge. So what is this Vigyan referring to? So let's say that we are studying chemistry, which you get knowledge about chemistry. Now, is it possible to have Vigyan of chemistry? If you take lab courses, so how would that look like? Tell us a little more.
You realize that in theory, we have a lot of
So are you referring to like a practical knowledge, like you understand what is different from book knowledge? You see how to apply it.
When you're just reading books, I just feel that there's safety about or gathering you but when you're in lab or about you don't have that book. You just not say, oh, I added
Okay, so that is practical knowledge. Anything else that and anything else that comes to your mind when you hear this word, realized knowledge? Think about a knowledge that area that you're knowledgeable about. It could be fashion, it could be politics, it could be neuroscience, it could be chemistry. There is some area in which we are knowledgeable about, or a few areas that we have specialized knowledge in to some degree. Accounting, finance. There is so many varieties of knowledge there. Yes, go ahead. Okay, so that is applied knowledge. So, for example, I study agriculture. I go to Texas A&M. Used to be an agriculture school at some point, and then I go to the fields and actually do the work. So that would be applied knowledge. If we're not still getting closer to this idea of realized knowledge, we're trying to bring that out. What is the difference between a practical knowledge, which is also essential, and realized knowledge? So in the spiritual context, knowledge would be obtained by reading the Gita, for example, and applied knowledge would be by practicing what is said in the Gita, right? So that is still knowledge and applied knowledge. All of that we will be including in this word jnana, which is still two different categories of knowledge. We still haven't reached the surface of vijnana, which is referred to as realized knowledge here. So any thoughts about that? How would it look like to have that? Mm-hmm. So experiential knowledge. So going that is beyond, it's going beyond just practical knowledge. It is, yes, it is practical, but it's also experience. That whatever we read in the Gita about the soul, for example, that we are not the body but the soul, becomes an experience, even for a few moments, or hopefully longer. It becomes a living experience in our life, and that is realized knowledge. And in this verse itself, we will see more symptoms of Vijnana. So, but what is this knowledge doing? Jnana Vijnana Tripta Atma, which means a satisfied person, a satisfied mind. So let's apply this to again other categories of knowledge. And it also does bring certain kind of satisfaction. Let's say I always wanted to study finance, and I go into the world and I get get an MBA or something in finance. And I feel satisfied with that because that was my passion. I felt very motivated, and I went on, did all the hard work and got the knowledge. So that is satisfaction, right? So like that, in the spiritual category of knowledge also, it is referring to satisfaction, but let's see what kind of satisfaction it is. So this satisfaction leads to the following: Kutasto Vijatendriya. It leads to, again, stability, and Vijatendriya, which means a full control over the mind and the senses. So that is not possible by any other kind of knowledge. So no matter how intricate or complicated it is, even if you are a very, very learned psychologist, that doesn't imply that you will be able to control your own mind, right? You may know everything that is out there, all analytical knowledge about the mind, but when it comes down to controlling your own habits, you may need to see another therapist. There is therapists who exclusively see other therapists. So that implies that those who are very educated, they cannot apply their knowledge to this effect of controlling the mind. So Kutasto Vijatendriya, but this Jnana and Vijnana is leading to control. And then again, there is a behavioral description of this yogi. Yukta iti uchyate yogi. This yogi is in unity or doing yoga. And here it is, let's see how it is translated. It's competent for self-realization. This yogi is supposed to be competent for self-realization. And which means other yogis are not competent for self-realization. So we can clearly see Krishna is very clear about how can you qualify and pass the tests, which is very important. If you go learn in a school and you say, oh, well, you just come in and you just stay here and we'll give you a certification and you go get a job. There is things like that, but those won't get us very highly rewarded careers. But if you go through a very rigorous training and pass a series of tests, then at some point you have crossed many barriers, and then you have actually gotten a big degree, and then you get a big reward from that, hopefully. So like that, these steps of qualification are clearly outlined here. Also in the 6th chapter, later you'll see the description of a immature and a mature yogi. I think we've seen it before. Anyway, so this yogi is become qualified for self-realization. And then there is behavior description. Sama is English, we call it same. So that samate is Sanskrit for same. So sama means same. Loshta is a stone, right? What is loshta here? Pebbles and stone, and kanchana is gold. So this person is seeing with the equanimity or with sameness, pebbles and stones and gold. So you can translate it like, let's say that you go run into ATM and someone just left their cash deposit there. And of course, when you go into ATMs, there is a bunch of papers hanging around in the trash. So if you look at those two, would you look at them equally? And or would you say this is just another piece of paper? Somebody left there, and it's same as the other pieces of paper in the trash. Would you do that? And on one level, it is true, right? There is no difference, objectively speaking, between these two categories. There is a value difference, obviously. But this yogi cannot go to the ATM, apparently, because they will take out the money from the ATM and think that it is the same as trash. That is not the case, obviously. So I'm just trying to bring how this yogi applies this knowledge to their life. Their vision is equal. They see gold and pebbles as equal. But what we are going to discuss here is how the yogi applies this knowledge. Okay, so let's read the translations for these 3 verses. The third one we haven't discussed. We haven't recited. But let's read it. Any volunteers here? Just one at a time. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah. Next one.
Such a person sees everything.
And last one. Yeah. So all of these three verses talk about equality. Yes.
When you say an equal mind, he himself is not affected, or he just deals with an enemy
It could mean both. So in the case of the yogi, which is described here as a jnana yogi, they don't choose to deal with this stuff. They go away to the forest and live there. There is no friends or enemies there. All our fellow yogis who are seeing everything as equal there also. So they don't deal with this stuff. They don't deal with pebbles gold and valuing them differently or valuing friends and enemies differently in life. But when this principle is applied in bhakti yoga, then you, although you see the equal vision, you will deal with it differently. That's a very good question, and we will come to that in the end. Yeah. Any other thoughts here? Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I knew the answer. Well, the answer is there in the Gita, which I'm trying to learn myself. Uh, but all of these verses are talking about equanimity here on different levels. One level of equanimity is how other people treat you. Sometimes people, most of the time, many times people don't treat you the way you like, especially after they know you. Initially, it is very nice when people meet each other and they're new and, like, say in a relationship, that everything is so nice and joyful and excited. People are excited to get to know each other. But after some time, the complacency starts to weigh on the relationship, and it turns from honor to dishonor. Well, you used to like something about the person, now you hate the exact same thing about that person, and so on. And then there is sourness, which can potentially arise. And this is just like, this is not uh, a conditional state of existence. This is just a natural state. This is what is expected in the world to happen. And the reason why that is expected to happen is because that we live in a dynamic situation, that at some point there is, let's say, in this situation, in a relationship, that two people's minds match. At another time, the minds will change, and the change in the mind is affected by external changes. So therefore, the things around a person change, things around me will change, and then my mind will change, and that is going to affect my relationships with other people. And therefore, the relationship's quality is going to change. So this world is all about change. So if somebody changes their mind, or if we change our mind, then that is a natural consequence of just existing in this world. Now, that doesn't mean that we should take every demand of the mind with equal seriousness, or we should take every change in the other person's mind with equal seriousness, because there are changes which are short term and there are changes which are long term, and then we have to think about it more carefully. But the change is a natural consequence of just living. But this yogi is not seeing that change. That is why it is said that this yogi is seeing the super soul, because they don't see things change. They don't see the dynamics. Not that they don't see, they see beyond the dynamics. So they see the positive and negative as the same. Just like, for example, Srila Prabhupada gave this example, if I remember well, that there is a source of electricity, and then you can use that example, you can use the electricity to heat something in a microwave or a stove, or you can use the same to freeze to very, very low temperatures. But the source of the energy is the same. That electricity is neutral for both heat and cold. So similarly, this honor and dishonor are two uses of the same energy, or like we have said, valuable things and useless things are both two different polarities of existence of the same energy. And that only externally we have applied those identifications on things. And that goes on to extend beyond to people who we like and dislike, also being the same side of the thing. So we will explore that a little more today. Any questions or comments so far? Okay, I want to bring up a question. So we know that what the body is made up of, right? What is the body made up of? Does anybody know here? There is water. It's a big percentage. I'm told is water. There is other stuff in there. Earth is there. Yeah. Minerals. Sorry. Five elements are there. What are the five elements you're referring to? Okay, so earth is there in the form of minerals. Water is there in the form of water. Uh, what is the third one? Fire. Fire is there in terms of the energy. For example, the energy which every cell uses for metabolism, or the energy of digestion, or the energy of thinking of the brain. What is the next one? Yeah, that is, there are different kinds of fire. There is also air, which is the air which we're breathing. There is other kinds of air, and then there is ether, which is space, because the body exists in a three-dimensional space. It has a specific location. So that is why it is made up of these five things. But what is the mind made up of? We are talking about this duality situation, which is experienced by the mind. So this figure is very accurate, actually. Although it may look very complicated, it is an accurate description of the what the mind is made up of. So what are those colors representing? Hmm. So yes, those are experiences and memories. And just like we categorized the body, just like we could have said that the body is made of the heart, the limbs, the brain, and other things. Similarly, that is one way to disintegrate or to look at the body. That what are the different components of it, and these are the different components of the mind, which is memories, emotions, etc. But what are the elemental constituents? Just like those five elements we saw, is those five elements are present in all the organs. So similarly, what are the basic components which are present in all these different functions of the mind, like emotions or behaviors or habits? What do you think is mind made up of? So can you translate it for us, please? That is also that is approximately correct translation. That's also referring to functional categories in the mind. We are talking about fundamental categories. Yes. Those are energies which are beyond the mind, that affect the mind, can more or less control the mind. So, for example, wait, let me finish this one. So, if there's an example would be that let's say I like chocolate cookies, chocolate chip cookies, but I know that it's not good for me. Then that is the intelligence affecting the mind. A very simple case. And the false ego affecting the mind is also applies to this idea of honor and dishonor. If somebody, let's say I go to a restaurant and I've reserved a spot there, but they do not give me the spot, even if I go like 10 minutes ahead of my reservation, they do not give me a seat. They don't let me be seated until the time of the reservation. And then I ask them why this is the case, and then they say, oh well, we don't always do this, and it depends. And then I think, oh, this is a case of racial discrimination. And that's where the false ego is starting to kick in, that I am a person of the specific identity of a race, and this restaurant is the other race, and they have a certain hatred towards me, and that is why they're not letting me sit down. So that is an example of a false ego affecting the mind. So those are energies beyond the mind, which also we have to deal with. What were you saying? What are the three gunas you're referring to? I'm sorry. Can you translate it for us, please? So this is a good. I think this is a good little detour that we should take and look into these three modes. No, it's okay. I think we should understand these are very important concepts which will come later more prominently in the Gita. The three modes are goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, movies which represent three modes: love, pray, and eat. What mode do you think it is? Love, pray, eat. Eat, love, pray. What was it called? Eat, pray, and love. Okay, some order you do it. Okay, what mode do you think it is? I'm sorry. Yeah, you choose from goodness, passion, or ignorance. Passion. So, why do you think it is passion? Pray. I don't know if you guys have actually seen it, but it is a depiction of the mode of goodness.
You could still pray and
Sure. Yeah. So that
passion as well. Depends on what
yeah, the activities of the character in that movie, I haven't seen that completely, is mainly in the mode of goodness, which is called sattva. There is also this sattva gets thrown out a lot these days. Just like yoga at some point became very popular, now sattva has become popular about the idea of this goodness that we are talking about, in which so we'll not get into details about what goodness is, but that's an example, just giving a reference point here. Another example for passion would be what? Fast and Furious 5 or 6, 7, 8, whichever. That would be an example of passion where you are very, very motivated to achieve something at the cost of making big sacrifices. There is, of course, a lot of other examples of that passion. And then what would be an example of ignorance? Okay, that is the effect. That's true. Let's find a movie example. A living example? Yeah, movie example would be any horror movie of your choice, where there is sadistic pleasures derived by hurting others and killing others, which is considered very abnormal by majority of the people. But it's very interesting that people go to these movies and enjoy those movies, especially the thrillers and the serial killers from Kentucky. I'm joking. I hope don't want to hurt anybody from Kentucky, but there is this idea that okay, we don't want to do it, but if someone else is doing it, especially in a movie, it's not real, then I can go enjoy it. So that is our enjoyment for the mode of ignorance. There is experiences also we can have, like sleep is an example of mode of ignorance. So anyways, that's a little detour of these three energies which are present. So the material world is divided, is motivated by these three energies: goodness, passion, and ignorance, which are affecting us all the time. That is not necessarily the function, the fundamental characteristics, the fundamental constituents of the mind, because that also affects the body, that also affects the mind, also affects the false ego. It also affects the day. For example, the morning time is considered to be more of goodness. Evening is more, afternoon, evening is passion, and night is no prize for guessing that, ignorance. So, and you can see that also, like if someone goes to the pub in the morning, you say like, really, you drink in the morning? Because you don't expect a person to do an activity of mode of passion or ignorance in the time of mode of goodness. So there is an intuitive understanding of that also in people's lives, and so that is how the entire world is divided into these three modes. But what is the constituents of the mind? So I'm going to give the answer here. This is what is inside the mind, which is referred in two verses actually. The verse is 3 point. If you have want to look up later, you can look up 3rd chapter 34th verse and 7th chapter 27th verse. And actually she has the Gita, so why don't you read it for us? 334. Yeah. And then 727. Yeah. So what is that? Icha, dvesha. I use those words here. I'm reading that verse, Sanskrit, Icha Dvesha Samuthena, which means that born from hatred and desire, Dvandva Mohena Bharata, being deluded by duality, Sarva Bhutani, all the living beings, which includes everyone, most of us in the room, it's safe to say that. Sarge Yanti Parantapa, that Sarge is creation, that since the beginning of creation, this has been the situation of everybody's mind. And what is the situation? That our minds have been confused because of duality. And what are those dualities? They're like we saw, like honor, dishonor, gold, and stones. And those are broadly categorized into Icha and Dvesha, which means likes and dislikes. And those things are like accounts. Like you can say like two heaps of accounts, two accounts that you keep crediting and debiting from. Mostly it is crediting. So what happens is that over a period of time, our likes and dislikes change. Also within this lifetime, you may have noticed that you liked chocolate when you were younger and now you don't like it, maybe. I'm just joking. I think chocolate is like on-time favorite, but there is things that you liked as a kid or as a younger adult which you don't like when you're an older adult. So likes and dislikes keep on changing depending on the situation, but they keep on accumulating also. And our behaviors are motivated by those likes and dislikes. Usually we have a very, the more we grow older, those likes and dislikes become more and more specific about this is exactly like how I want my pasta to be cooked. You know? And if it's like 1 degree colder or hotter, then you don't like it. And you can see that as we grow older, this becomes a reality that our likes and dislikes become more and more pigeonholed in one sense, or become more and more narrow. Their scope becomes limited. Uh, that is, I think what my understanding is that is two things there going on. One is a biological effect of just living a life, in one body. However, what happens across the body is that these likes and dislikes do not necessarily become narrow. That when we get another, let's say from this lifetime, the next lifetime, I become, let's say, a pigeon. I will have a different set of likes and dislikes, which will then, after that lifetime, if I become something else, those will not necessarily overlap. So there is so much. This brings about this idea of parallel universes. Anybody heard this idea of parallel universes? So what does it speak to you? What does a parallel universe theory mean? About the universe's theory? I've found I'll show a video later actually where I'm seeing like I've found more and more overlapping information, nothing pulling away. Yeah, we'll come to that. So this parallel universe, I'm not intimately familiar with it. Did you want to say something? Yeah.
Parallel universe, as I understand it, that it's an alternative reality that
Okay. Also, there is an understanding that the reality is a perceptual reality, because it arises in the Gita. Krishna talks about samsparsaja, which means that because we are having these outlets into the world, which are our senses, that we can experience reality, and that is our reality. But that reality is different for different people, and sometimes it doesn't even overlap. Let's say, for example, if you're from Pennsylvania, then you don't like the sports team from New York, right? I mean, you cheer different sports teams. Even if you live in New York, but you grew up in Pennsylvania, you go back and you cheer their team. You cheer your own home team, like that. That's a very simple example. There's broader, more different. There is more different independence. For example, a reality of a species is different from another species. So, like what let's say there is so many mice in New York City, and what one mouse likes romantically about another mouse, that we wouldn't like the same thing about the mouse, even though that is completely true for the mouse. That there is no argument. You cannot, if the mouse were to come talk with you, you cannot argue saying that this other mouse is not attractive, right? You cannot convince the mouse. So similarly, if the mouse cannot convince us that the person that we find attractive is not attractive, for them it's just another hideous monster who is trying to get them out of the of the subways. All these people are hideous monsters to the mouse. It doesn't matter how beautiful they are or what kind of modeling careers they have or what kind of figures they have, and that doesn't really, the mouse couldn't care less. These are all monsters for the mouse, but other mouse are not monsters for them. So similarly, for our vision, all mouse are equal. We want to get rid of them. Yes, well, that's only example of a mouse. You could also take example of dogs. We want to pet them, for example, but all of the dogs are equal for us, more or less. Of course, there's dog competitions, which people, that's a different thing. I'm sorry. Yeah, we saw that in the 5th chapter about the yogi seeing an elephant and a cow, and the people who eat elephant and cow, and what else? A priest. Everything with the same vision. We saw here the same thing about the vision about, we saw this, what was it? Affectionate well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, neutral people, mediators. And this talks about how different parties participate in a conflict. And we'll come to that in the end. I don't want to bring that up later. So we were going back, we were talking about these two things which are made up in the mind, which the mind is made up of, which is Ichcha, which is likes and dislikes. And this has been happening since when? Since yesterday? Or since the beginning of our life? According to what we read, the verse that she read, 7:27, this has been happening since a time that we cannot trace, since the beginning of time, since we have been existing practically, that we have had the dual existence and have been guided by the duality of our mind to live our life. So spiritual inquiry starts with looking beyond the duality of our mind, and that is why it is here referred to as partial liberation, right? What is it? How is it called liberation? We saw that here. For one who has conquered the mind, which means who's seeing beyond the duality, the super soul is already reached. That means that this person is already partially liberated because they are learning to see beyond the duality, which they've never seen before. So that's the mind. So now there is two options. Now we know this reality. We always talk about these two options in different ways. So today we'll talk about it in this way. There is two options. One is that we know, for our knowledge is telling us that what happens. So let's say I have I have likes and dislikes, right? So if I go for my likes to the degree that my mind wants, what is going to happen? That the like is that my strength for that object or whatever person or habit is going to increase more, and that like or ichcha will become more and more solidified, and then if I keep doing it more, it's going to become more and more solidified, and so on. So that we talked about that. So that is one option A, that we go on solidifying our desires more and more. That is one thing you could do. And that's what most people do, unknowingly or knowingly, that we go on solidifying our likes and dislikes, right? That's one. That is called in the Gita as kami. So let's look into this verse about what happens with this option. Okay. So, does anybody want to read the translation, the English here? Any volunteers? Yes. I'm sorry to reveal that to you. The important part here is adhering by the principles of the three Vedas. So in the Gita, right in the beginning, these principles of the three Vedas are called as one who follows these principles is compared to a person who is stuck in a forest, and it's a forest of delusion. So heavily throughout the Gita, you will see Krishna is separating the knowledge that he is giving in the Gita from the knowledge which is there in the three Vedas, which is he's referring to here. So let's see what is happening here. Tetam bhuktva swarga lokam vishalam. So by they go on enjoying, bhuktva is to enjoy heavenly pleasures, also referred in the previous verse as deva bhogan or godly delights. Wouldn't that be nice to have godly delights? Does anybody want to sign up for that? We don't have the sign up sheet here in the Bhakti Center, but we are into something else here. But you could sign up, huh? What? Prasadam is we will. You mentioned that this any activity which is in reference to pure devotional services beyond the three modes, it's not even mode of goodness. So therefore, prasadam will not be a godly delight. Godly delight will be like heavenly pleasures. For example, this person whose position is known as Indra, this person has many wives and very beautiful girls, etc., and he has a lot of wine, etc., whatever he needs. And the good thing about it, according to them and according to us obviously, is that they never get old. So that's the fun part, right? You never get old, which means you can enjoy all these godly delights for however long you want. Not however long, but for a really long time compared to us. And then you just know that you have, like, on the products you see that best if used by date. So like that you have that date that after some point you're just going to die, which is described in this verse, that what happens after that. Kshine punye martya lokam vishanti, that after that expiry date, kshine, that means the credit is lost, the credit is finished. You go back to the world of, come back to here, to New York City. Evam trai dharmam anuprapanna, which means these people have been very religious. Anuprapanna means sincerely following. Very pious people. Trai dharman means three Vedas. And gatatam, gata agatam, kama kama labante. Does anybody remember gata and agata? These two words familiar to anyone? It refers to the first thing which Krishna said. Do you want to read 2.11? It's actually very nice that you bring it. Yeah. So gata and agata is referred to as birth and death. But Krishna refers to as either 11 or 13, but try 11 first. How does it begin, the Sanskrit? Just tell me the first word. No, the first word of the verse. Asauchayan. So asauchayan anvasauchascha pradnyavadamsha bhasase. Asauchayan is anvasauchasta, which means you are appearing to be learned, but actually you're not. Indirectly he's saying that you're foolish, because you're seeing life and death differently. That is Krishna's definition of someone who is foolish. Think about it, like really, that is a very high standard of not being foolish. If you cross beyond that standard, then you're liberated. So anyways, gatas and agata is life and death. Kama is a very important word. And then let's look at 2.70. In the meanwhile that she pulls up, kama means desire. Anybody have heard of kama? And in what reference? So kama means desire. And especially here it means a selfish desire, a desire for sensual pleasure, selfish sensual pleasure. And kama means desiring to fulfill a desire. These are two different things, that we may have hundreds and thousands of desires, but we may be determined to not fulfill them. But they may still get fulfilled by the effect of time or by the effect of destiny. So that is not a kami. But here is called, this person who is a very pious person is called a kami. So do you want to read it for us? 2.70. Yeah, 70. So this kami is referred to, the yogi is the exact opposite. That you will see in the verse that she reads, that yogi may have desires, but that yogi doesn't desire to fulfill the desires. That is that one of the definitions of the yogi. She will read it. So that is called with the same words there, kama kami. So when a person is striving to satisfy their desires, which are arising from ichcha and dvesha, which going back we saw the constituents of the mind, then what is going to happen is those ichcha and dvesha are going to become more and more solidified, and that is why there is going to be a lack of peace. So does that make sense? Why would satisfaction or a hedonic satisfaction of desires lead to lack of peace? What about it would lead to lack of peace? Okay. What? Okay, so that is, yeah, tell us more. So are you saying that because I try to satisfy desire, but because the outcome is impermanent, then we kind of we become very distressed because what the fruit of our desire went away. It's no longer with us. So that, yeah, that is the main reason. It's also known as, in fact, it is very clearly defined as dukkha yoni. This karma contains a dukkha yoni within it. Just like if you go for fishing, which we don't recommend, but if you have seen anybody going fishing, they have this hook and a bait. So the hook is inside the bait, right? And the fish obviously doesn't see the bait, doesn't see the hook, and it is a big worm or whatever the fish food is hanging on that little bait. And then initially it seems so nice that is the fish is chewing on and on and on, but at some point it's just like going to capture the fish, and the fish is going to die. So that is dukkha yoni. Of course, in this example, the fish dies. In our life, we are not necessarily going to die if we fulfill the desires, but it refers to the seed of suffering is included within the enjoyment. So that is the nature of this karma, and that is why the recommendation is that you become na kama kami, which means that you begin to have a determination to not give in to all desires that the mind brings in. And we will discuss it later in more details. There is an example. I didn't know that this would apply for every slide, but anyways, there is an example in the Vedas, in the Bhagavatam, about this person called Dhruva. Has anybody heard of this person? He's like a little kid. He is a little kid, not like he's 5 years old. And then I want to mention this story briefly because this Dhruva story refers to the first option that he selected was which we discussed, kama kami, that desiring to fulfill the desires. So it so happened that in his life he was having a difficult relationship with his father, and that was not that it was an ongoing relationship problem. One time he was trying to climb his father's lap, and then his stepmother said that you cannot do that because I am more closer to your father and you are not my son, so you cannot get on your father's lap. So he became very upset as a 5-year-old child and expected his father to say something, which he did not. His father just remained neutral, which we saw today. Remember this neutrality stuff? Neutral. The father remained neutral, but if this Dhruva was already a realized yogi, he couldn't care less. But he did care a lot. He became very, very upset, and the father was not mediating either. And his mother was envious. So he saw all of these different characteristics in these two people. And then he left from there and he went to his real mother, his biological mother. And then he said that, look, this has happened, and my father has really upset me, and I want to take revenge, and for that I want to have a kingdom which is bigger than my grandfather. So his grandfather happens to be the creator, the secondary creator of the universe, known as Brahma, which means that he owns practically the entire universe because he created it. But this boy is going out and saying that I want something bigger than that. And then his mother very sincerely tells him that only Vishnu can give you that. And he says, okay, well, where can I find this Vishnu? So she says, you should go to the forest and meditate. So he sets out to the forest. And on the way, he meets this spiritual teacher called Narad Muni. Has anybody heard of him? What about him have you heard? Is anything you like about him? He's a troublemaker. He likes that. Okay. Who likes troublemakers? I'm sorry. Anything else have you heard about him? He what? He had a history. Yeah, so that he has a history. Yes, so anything about him that you like about his present life as Narad Muni? Have he has many famous disciples. This Dhruva is one of them. Another is Prahlad. Anybody heard of him? You've heard of Prahlad? Yeah. So he's also the disciple of Narad Muni. And also Vyasa is a disciple of Narad Muni. Vyasa is the person who wrote down all the Vedas, including the 3 Vedas which Krishna just criticized, were written by Vyasa. And the Bhagavatam is also written by him. So like that, he has many disciples. So he met this Dhruva because he knew that something's up with this kid. So he went and met him and tried to give him some moral advice, which is similar to this advice, mode of goodness advice, right? To see, I'm going to stop going back, but let's read it one more time. A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral mediators, the envious, friends and enemies, and the pious and the sinners with equal mind. So he said to this little kid that this is what you should do, that this little thing shouldn't matter you, shouldn't bother you. And then he gave more detailed advice about if you meet someone who is more qualified, how can you look at them with respect? How can you learn from them? If you meet someone who is equal, how to treat them? And then if you meet someone who is less qualified than you in some sense, then how do you deal with that situation? But this Dhruva said that this is doesn't I cannot wrap my head around this. He said that all this is nice stuff, but I just don't get it. Just tell me how to find Vishnu. So that was a test for him. So he went out to the forest and did very severe austerities with a desire. We are talking about kama kami. So what was his desire? The first kama is desire, which refers to achieving a kingdom bigger than his grandfather. And the second kama refers to his determination to get it fulfilled. So he was very determined. And then he was suggested a very simple practice, which I'm joking, but it was a very austere practice of eating for 5 months. He did this. First month he eat only a special kind of fruit called a kapita fruit, which only the monkeys like, which that he did only once in 3 days. And then the next month he only ate the leaves falling from the trees, which are dried leaves, once in 9 days. And anybody remembers the third and the fourth and the fifth month? Yes, go ahead. And that was once in 12 days. Mm-hmm. And so this was the plan. This was the strategy that was suggested to him. And Narad Muni also suggested a mantra that he can chant. And that's so that he can see Vishnu at some point. And this was the path that he was suggested, which is, anybody who like that? It's only 5 months. Some of us have been practicing for many long years. And Dhruva could achieve the darshan of Vishnu in 5 months. So he could do that. And after 5 months, he got a darshan of Lord Vishnu in front of him. And then something very interesting happened. It was a change of mind. And what exactly happened? First, there is a detailed description. First of all, he couldn't figure out how to pray. I don't know why this is happening. He couldn't figure out how to pray. And he said that I'm really not qualified to pray. So what happened is the Lord touched his forehead with a conch shell. And then he began to pray. And then one of his prayers, he says that, actually I feel a great amount of regret having have these intense selfish desires to fulfill in my life. I feel very bad about it and I really don't want it anymore. It has been like what I'm seeing now compared to what I wanted. What I wanted is really like some broken pieces of glass, but I have the real diamond with me, which is you. So he had this realization and a change of mind by seeing Krishna there. And then the conversation goes on. Then what happens at the end is that he does get a planet which is bigger than his grandfather's to rule. And then even before that, he's asked to go back to his current life and eventually rule the earthly planet which his father was ruling for 36,000 years. So anybody wants to do that, like rule the earth for 36,000 years? That translates to 30 years of human life now. At that time, the lifespan was 100,000 years. Now it is even 70 years, so 20 years. So anyways, he was given that opportunity to go back, even if he did not want. So he had a change of mind. So this is an example of a person who started with kama kami, exclusive desire, very focused, did not want any good advice from the saintly persons. He just wanted to go and get it. So he decided to go and get it, but he approached Krishna for that. And that is why he got both out of it. First, he got the darshan. He knew that after this lifetime he's going to go back to Godhead. And then he also got the double benefit of enjoying the kingdom while he was on this planet, even though he did not want. So that is one path. That is the first option that we talked about, kama kami. But you should understand that he had to suffer a lot to go through that. It's not just his 5 month austerities, which is itself a lot of suffering. But even before that, everything was taken away from him. A small kid going to the forest. You think he did not miss his mom? He a 5-year-old boy. He had a lot of affection for his father, his mother, for his friends at that time, and everything. He gave up everything. He was dishonored. And nowadays, nobody takes honor and dishonor beyond political motivations. But at that time, if a ruler or a kshatriya was dishonored, that was worse than death for them. Like really worse than death. So they would rather prefer to die than live as a person who is dishonored. And there is examples about how some of the kings were dishonored by Krishna for their mischievous behavior. And for one of the kings just got a very weird shave, and he had to live with that weird shaved head for his entire lifetime, and that was worse than death for him. So like that, dishonor was taken very, very seriously, and then this Dhruva had to go through that dishonor, had to go through a lot of suffering through the austerities, and eventually when he got the desire, he found a path to fulfill his desires. He did not want that. So although he began in a very selfish place, which is described here as kama kami, gata agatam kama kama labhante, he did not actually go back to the cycle of birth and death because he was wanting those desires to be fulfilled from Krishna. But however, when we want our desires to be fulfilled, or many people want their desires to be fulfilled, they're not necessarily wanting to be fulfilled from Krishna. We want them to be fulfilled in many different ways. We want them to be fulfilled on our own strength, or we want to be fulfilled from some very, very powerful political person that we have connections with, that we've been lobbying for, etc. Or there is so many sources to get our things fulfilled. So that kind of fulfillment, that kind of kama kami is definitely going to lead to frustration. So that would mean that you take the charge completely in your hand and you start to manage your life. Now my motivation is very clear, that whatever desires I have, I'm going to do my best to fulfill them, and I'm going to live a very productive life, so have a very successful career. So it's the same old story that everybody is familiar with, that everybody has been cultured and taught in school and in college, etc., that we're going to try to live this life without ever thinking about the larger picture of life, without ever thinking that actually it is God who is the source of everything, and that if I just ask, I may get some of my weird desires fulfilled. Which is what Dhruva had, a very weird desire to have a kingdom bigger than the universe. Anybody has that desire crossed anybody's mind here? It's never crossed our mind, but it crossed his mind. Not just crossed, he took it very seriously. So if Krishna can fulfill that, then obviously he can fulfill other desires also if he wants to. But we don't want to do the austerities. We don't have to go to the forest, but we don't even want to do simpler things in order to please Krishna and to have our desires fulfilled, if that is our partial motivation. Yes. So that was taught by Narad Muni. So this 5-year-old is a different 5-year-old, than it's not the same 5-year-old body that we would have today. So obviously he was capable of that. Otherwise, if you tell that to a 5-year-old today, it would be child abuse. So that was, Narad Muni did not do child abuse to Dhruva. Obviously, he got the effect of the realization. But that time the bodies were different, and you can see from various contexts about living 36,000 years and ruling, etc. So when we take things into our hands, then we want to manage it within our capacity. This Krishna says that we start to struggle. So anybody remembers that verse? Prakriti sthani karshati. Anybody remembers? It's in the 7th chapter, I think. No, after that. Anyways, Krishna says in that verse that The living entities within this material world, they are constantly fighting and struggling with my energy. Why are they fighting and struggling? Because they want to have their desires fulfilled independent of Krishna. So I want to show an example of that through a video. Yes, can you please tell us, recite it and tell us the translation for it?
I'm not easy about this.
Okay, you can recite it, yeah. So Mamai Vamsha means these people are really they're part of me. They're my Amsha. And they're eternal. But what is the next part? And then Mana and Shashta Indriya, which means with the mind and the six and the five senses, there is a constant battle going on. That's the battle of our life. It's nothing very fancy. It's just our life. It's described as by Krishna as a battle. That battle is going on, and the tools in that battle are the mind and the five senses. And the reason why we're fighting the battle is we want to exploit and we want to increase our enjoyment, selfish enjoyment more and more, which is very natural for anybody existing in this world if there is no other better options. Okay, I should have done this before, but I think this is the one. Okay, let's try.
Everything down in this journal, everything that might be clogging up the old.
Can you hear this?
Ideas, goals for the year, shopping lists. It all goes right here in one convenient color-coded location.
Wow, there is a lot of stuff in here.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you worry that the important stuff will get lost?
I'm one step ahead of you, Zach. That's why I also have this to-do app. It tells me everything I need to get done in the day in case it falls out of my brain or my journal.
Update journal.
Oh, see? A reminder to update my journal. This thing has really kept me on the ball, especially now that I need to spend 2 hours journaling every day. Oh, there, gotta do that too.
This all sounds pretty stressful.
Stressful? Yeah, it is. That's also why I downloaded this meditation app. Did you know that just an hour of meditation a day gives me the energy I need to catch up on all the work that piled up while I was meditating? It's true.
Pay meditation bill.
But isn't that kind of counterintuitive? Yes, it also sends me a reminder every 5 seconds to breathe.
Rest your eyes by looking away from screen.
Track, I gotta be honest, it feels like these systems are stressing you out even more.
I thought the same thing, and that's why I bought this fidget cube.
Oh no.
Yeah. It's a little tiny cube with a bunch of little buttons that don't do anything, and little wheels and gizmos and stuff. That helps me relax. It's kind of like doing work, but it doesn't do anything.
How much did you spend on all
I
this?
haven't had the courage to look, but it's all here in the journal, okay? So it's worth every penny, because if I didn't buy all this stuff, then how could I relax after spending money on all this stuff?
The organized journal.
Ah, gotta do that. It's getting a little out of control in there, guys. I think I gotta rework the whole organizational system. That'll help me relax.
You say so.
I use it. I do say so, Zach. I can finally relax because of all these things, and because of my calming fragrances and my ergonomic chair. I can finally relax now, Zach.
Okay, that's the end. So, any thoughts about this? No, it's on this channel called College Humor on Facebook. Yeah. It's called Maybe This Will Fix My Life. Yeah, so any thoughts about this? Somebody said it's true. Okay. What part of it is true? Anybody has tried these meditation apps and reorganization journals and what? Yes, go ahead.
Saying the guy was miserable because he was trying to control things that usually cannot be controlled or out and he can. That's why he was getting all this stress. He had that controlling.
That's a very good point. Which we are talking about today is the controlling tendency, which Srila Prabhupada refers to that the controller and the Lord is controller of all that we survey. So this person surveyed a lot of things and wanted to control them. And then he got into a lot of trouble and anxiety because of that. Yes. Any other thoughts? So reduce the number of apps. Okay, so relax out of the work. Okay, any other thoughts? That is not necessarily true. Okay. Yes. Yes, you want to say? Of course, this is a common extreme example. This is not, hopefully not, how our life looks like, except apart from when we are here. But that goes to show how things can be in different ways. So yeah, so does anybody have any other thoughts about how this specifically relates to this idea of karma kami that we've been discussing? And then we've seen the story of Dhruva, who was initially a karma kami, which means a person who wants to fulfill all their desires. How much ever outlandish those desires may be, like wanting a kingdom bigger than your grandfather, bigger than the universe, etc. And that those desires get fulfilled and they don't want it anymore. So we saw his transition in his life from being a kamakami to being the opposite, na kamakami, right? So how does this video relate to that? And then we saw that that could be done in Dhruva's case by approaching Krishna and then going through a teacher who at that time knew his capacity to do the austerities and guided him with mantra and with practices, and he got the realization through that. Or that you could try to do that without any divine intervention or without any divine connection even in our life. They try to do it all by ourselves by completely taking the situation in our hands. And then this is a result of that. Of course, slightly exaggerated, but just to make the point very clear. So, any thoughts about that? How does that relate? Somebody said about controllership. Yes. Yes, he did try a little bit of that also. Didn't quite work out for him in this case, which was the meditation apps and the little thing. What is it called? The fidget. Yeah, yeah. Yes, so this is a very good word, which is balance. And then somebody talked about controllership. So the way we can link these two together is by under by for the at least for the purpose of the discussion, understanding or assuming that we are in a reality, which is let's just call it a virtual reality, which is not designed by us. So the reality around us is not designed by us, including the reality that we experience. There is other realities which we don't experience. We saw the example of the mouse. The mouse shares the same room as us, but sees a completely different world, right? Their reality is not designed by us. That is, anybody can accept it. But let's go one step further and accept this idea that the reality that we experience is not designed by us, which means that we have not necessarily set forth everything in detail about what are the situations that are going to come in my life, to what magnitude they are going to come, to what intensity they are going to come. Now, so that is the reality that is happening to us. We do have some control over us in the sense that if we do something, we get a result of that, and that in the future becomes a part of our reality. So in that sense, the reality is malleable. You can modify that, but you only have a limited control to modify our reality. That is a fact. And that is why when we try to take complete control of the reality, then we end up being frustrated. And it could be frustrated in this way, or it could be frustrated in other ways. And there is all sorts of different mechanisms that exist for for reducing anxiety, etc., which some of you have mentioned, which is can bring temporary reliefs. But over a period of time, unless we accept the idea that I only have a partial control over my reality, and that someone else has a complete control over me and my broader reality and the reality of the rat in my apartment and in others' apartments and other people in this world, then we can come to a more peaceful level. That was also mentioned in this verse 2.70, and also mentioned in the verse that we read today. Let's go back to see, just connecting the dots here. So for one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, which means that they are not only trying to manage their lives best, but they're seeing that the super soul is a reality in their life, and that super soul has, or God or Krishna has more control over my reality than I have, or has complete control over reality than I have. Now that doesn't mean that God or Krishna is trying to take either a sadistic or a non-sadistic pleasure in manipulating your reality beyond your desire. The reality is going to get modified based on our desires, but that we do not have a complete control over it. So that is the acceptance of the super soul, and that person has achieved tranquility, which in this video the person was trying to achieve tranquility while maintaining his balance in this world. So that is connecting the dots here. So we saw option A, to become a kamakami, or to stay a kamakami if you're already one. And to do that, to fulfill the desires in two ways, either by approaching Krishna, approaching a spiritual teacher, and finding out how to go about doing this in a balanced way, or just taking the whole situation in our control, forget any spiritual teachings, forget Krishna, just I'm going to live my life in my own terms, and I'm going to try to optimize my outcomes, which this person was trying to do. It was an optimization problem. He was trying to optimize his life. And then we saw the benefits and the defects of both approaches. And then the video was obviously showing the defects of that approach. So any thoughts or questions so far? Or any reflections about what we have discussed, starting with this equality idea? Any reflections? Okay, so I will summarize again. We talked about equanimity, and we talked about how we are interacting in this world, and then two ways to approaching. One way is to give in and try to get all our desires fulfilled, and within that we saw two categories. One is with God in the center, one is without, right? And now we are talking about the other option. The other option is what partially is referred to is by cultivating detachment, very specifically cultivating detachment. And these verses are talking about that a person, when someone says good things about them and bad things about them, they think the same way. Now, if someone comes and starts to praise you, oh, you're a very nice singer, or you're a very nice person, and you are very, let's say, soft spoken, or you help people, and then usually you would just wait and think, like, when is the other part coming? When is this person going to use the word but, and then start to really bring in the message? So we kind of know that that we will get judged based on our behavior in both good and bad ways. But what happens is we say the first part is as good as the second part, isn't it? The first part is not just necessarily, let's say genuinely someone praises you and then points out a defect that they feel is there in you. What would your attention go to? If let's say there is 9 very good qualities of you glorified extensively, and then but this there is some problem there. So what would your attention go to? It goes to the bad one. So that is the problem here, that we've discussed this before, of the idea of negativity bias. that we have. So that clearly shows in a very, very simple way that normally speaking, we are not equal towards honor and dishonor. We don't take honor seriously unless it is not mixed with dishonor. So we don't take praise seriously unless it is completely free from any criticism. Only then we take, yes, go ahead. So honor seriously would mean that you feel, oh yeah, this is, tell me more. That this is very nice and I would like to hear more about my glories. Maybe, I can help you a little bit here. You didn't count these other great things about me. That's the way of taking honor seriously. Of course, devotees do not take honor or dishonor. That is also there in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's verse, Shishtashtakam. You remember that? Trinada Pisuni Chena. So becoming humble than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree, again referring to taking honor and dishonor equally. That's a devotional way to apply this bhakti application of this verse that we saw. But normally speaking, we are not really equal in honor and dishonor, and we don't see them separately. We are very, very heavily influenced, especially by the dishonor. And there's other things which are mentioned like friends and enemies. And we talked about this in relationships, things, people changing over time. That the same thing that you like about the person, you could exactly hate the same thing. Or over a period of time, you could learn more and more things to hate about the person instead of liking the person. Obviously the person has good qualities and both bad qualities, but it so happens that you end up learning about their bad qualities. It's a matter of chance that we say that it happened, that things that did not work, and we try to put all these different sugar coating around why things are not working. But actually, we just ended up seeing the wrong in the person, and then many times we're helpless to do that. So this idea also we talked about in this verse, referring to gold and stone equally. So let's say that you're dating someone, and then you're expecting that person to propose to you, or you're going to propose to that person. And that person gives you a ring which has a stone in it, and you're a devotee and you're here practicing Krishna consciousness, and you're supposed to take gold and stone equally seriously. So how do you feel about that? You only have the knowledge. You just know that they're constituently the same elements. It's just that they look different. One shines, the other doesn't shine. How would you feel about that, honestly? It doesn't matter. Okay. Yes, unless there is helicopters watching, like some very famous celebrity weddings have there's helicopters watching, and there's live casted, and then somebody brings you a ring with chewing gum on it. I mean, it can be a good joke, but if it is not done in a joking way, especially if you are a millionaire and you can afford to have very costly stones in rings, and if you still give a stone or a bubble gum, it's going to be offensive for most people, if not for you. Yes, if you well, here you see that it is symbolic, but really depends on where they're used. So if this in this case the jewel is considered the same as stone, but you offer, so that doesn't mean that, let's say you want to offer a piece of jewelry to Krishna. That doesn't mean that you offer a piece of jewelry made of stone. You still want to offer a piece of jewelry made up of gold, because that offering is beyond any offering or gift made within the material world. It's beyond all the horizontal relationships that we can have. with other jivas. That is a vertical relationship that we are having with the super soul, that we are having with God. And therefore, the same value propositions doesn't apply there. So what we want to do is described by Jiva Goswami, one of the characteristics of devotees, that they offer the best that they have to Krishna. So the best that we have on this planet could be a certain type of jewel, that the best we can go and afford. Of course, what does Krishna say in the 10th chapter about the practice of devotional service being very simple? He says, you can offer to me a fruit, a flower, a leaf, or water. He doesn't talk about jewels and diamonds. But if you have the capacity, then, and if you still never, keep all the, big money only for your enjoyment and give only water, Krishna doesn't necessarily see what you have, but he sees what is the intention behind offering that. That is also there in the 4.11. Do you want to read 4.11 for us? Yes, go ahead. Yeah, while you're opening, he's going to ask a question. Yeah. Yeah, let's read the verse and then we'll come to that. Good question. 11th verse in the 4th chapter. So essentially, we are talking about neutrality here. And yes, go ahead.
As all surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows me.
So, as all surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. Can you read the Sanskrit for us? Ye yatha mam prapadyante. Yeah, is that the one? So, as one surrenders, and the teachers, the acharyas have translated that according to the mood in which you approach Krishna, he will reciprocate to that. As one surrenders doesn't necessarily mean that what clothes you wear or how much gifts you bring, etc., and all the other external things. Those things are also important, but what is Krishna saying is the mood in which you're wearing devotional clothes, or the mood in which you're offering your prayers, the mood in which you're offering gifts and offering donations, etc. That is really what he's seeing. So therefore, he's not seeing the opposite. Okay, so I think this is time. I'm sorry for a abrupt stop, but we will do kirtan now for about half an hour, and then I believe we will have prasad in the end in the back. So we'll come back to that question in the end. Thank you. Please stay for the prasad and kirtan. We'll come back to your question.